Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
Jess, are you here?
I'm here. How are you feeling, Alex?
I'm doing well. Jess is podcasting and live streaming the verdict right now.
For the Johnny Depp trial.
Most of you probably
I'm sure
already
other
heard
people
it,
are too if you're on a Wednesday.
but you've heard it by Friday. But I just looked over at her computer, and usually it's notes. Right now it's court
Yeah,
TV.
I got my notes too.
You're still like, I don't know, a good 11 to 13 minutes away from hearing it. Sorry about
Maybe
that.
you can break it to us live, but to our listeners 3 days
based
later.
on what'd you say, 12 to 13 minutes away?
Yeah.
Now people could figure out maybe what time we record the podcast.
Or maybe your mood changes depending
Maybe
on
it
who you're
does.
rooting for or
We'll see.
against.
We'll see. Okay. I have a question that I thought of today because I have been having to do a few Amazon orders, I guess, for my grandma and my mom, a couple people. And I was looking at my orders and I was wondering, thought it'd be fun if we shared like the last 3 things we ordered from Amazon.
Can't do it. Sorry.
And if
Already
there's
out of
an
this
inappropriate one, Alex,
No,
you
I'm
can
just
skip to the next one.
Inappropriate.
I don't know. You kind of have that
Wait.
look.
The last 3 things. The
last 3 things you ordered on your Amazon.
Okay.
Mostly,
your
honestly,
last
my
3 Amazon
wife
orders.
does most of the Amazon ordering these days.
Oh, yeah?
But I do know, yesterday I ordered, so we're taking a family vacation next week to Colorado. Don't worry. We still have a podcast, listeners.
Yes, we do.
And so our van is having some issues, so we rented a van, and I don't know if it's going to have like a DVD player or not. So I got an arm attachment for like an iPad in case our kids watch, a movie or two in there. And I'm hoping it'll Bluetooth and it's like a movie theater experience. So
With
I know
a
that's
tiny screen.
That's
All right,
the
so
last thing I ordered, but
'Kay.
beyond that,
Give us the real juice. What are the other 2 things that were like the random?
I ordered the book Meta Church, How to Use the Digital Media in the Church, and then I also got a car code reader. So my life has been really
You
cool
are
on
an
Amazon.
exciting person, Alex.
Oh man, this is so personal.
And gifts. I actually did order gifts that we give our guest on next week's podcast. We're a part of that too.
Don't give that away.
I'm just glad I haven't ordered anything real embarrassing lately because I'd feel obligated to share that. Let's see. Most recent, it's going to be arriving Wednesday, is the subscription I have for furnace filters that comes every 6 months.
Very exciting.
That automatically
Subscribe
just...
and
that's
save.
smart.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any subscribe and saves going on, Jess, with Amazon?
No, I don't actually.
Yeah, that's the only one
No.
that's the first and only one I've done because we got a new furnace. Our old furnace had the type of filter you had to cut it out and then put it on there. It was a pain.
Mm-hmm.
But we got a new furnace this year and it uses the actual cardboard thing you can slide in. So
That's
I was
adulting.
so excited to set this up because now I don't think about it as every 6 months they ship me filters. The other thing was I ordered a lawnmower that recently because I've had the same lawnmower for almost 12 years.
Going electric, going battery?
I am.
Okay.
I finally upgraded to an electric lawnmower. I've had the same gas powered lawnmower since we moved into our house in 2008, 2009.
Oh, wow.
And I've never done
served
any
you well.
maintenance on it. I've never put oil in it. I've never done anything to this lawnmower other than to put gas in it.
That's what we call Old Faithful.
And now it burns through like a whole tank of gas in one mowing session, which it's a very small
have
yard.
A crack in your gas tank.
Oh, it's bad.
Yeah.
But it's lasted very long. But yeah, I'm going electric. Just going to try that out. So
That's the closest I'll ever be to a Tesla is my electric lawnmower. So I'm proud of it.
And the third thing is a box of 70-calorie Fiber One brownies.
Ooh, okay. You put those, let me tell you, you put those with sugar-free chocolate pudding and sugar-free whipped topping.
Okay.
You
make
mix
like
that
a ice
together,
cream?
and then you break up those brownies, and then you freeze it. It is like Game Changer Academy.
Glorious.
Wow, and it cleans your colon too.
I mean, keeps you regular. That's good. Just like this podcast.
All right. Is that a thing we're advertising?
No, we are regular.
Okay.
And
And we
I thought you were saying if you listen to this, it keeps you regular.
If anyone has listened to this on the toilet, let us know. Appreciate it.
Don't let us know. Jess, what's the 3 things you ordered?
Okay, the last 3 things I ordered. I ordered a multi-hook shepherd's hook. So you know how a shepherd's hook like holds a plant? There's like one hook. I have one that like has multiples.
Oh, wow.
It has like
okay.
4 hooks on it.
That's exciting.
It's coming Friday.
Oh,
Wow.
And then I also ordered a new pool floaty.
I see that's running late.
It's running late. So I got an update for that. It's coming.
Hopefully your kid doesn't drown
Yeah.
while it's running late.
And then I ordered, I found a small business that sells corn cobs that
for
you
your
can give
picnic
your
table.
squirrels because I have the little. Remember, I think this was like back when I first started. I have the
Okay.
squirrel picnic table.
Yeah. No, I thought you just
So-
meant like corn, like regular, like you were
No.
going to order corn on Amazon.
I ordered some ears
Okay.
of corn for
All
my
right.
squirrels.
That's awesome.
We are just a lively bunch. That's
I mean,
that's
those are
what
the
we've
most
learned.
exciting Amazon orders
Practical.
ever. Yeah.
But share your last top 3.
Yeah. If it's
And support
orders.
local
I think it's
business
interesting.
as well. One of the things I do appreciate is a lot of places do price match Amazon these days, which is nice because I'm the guy that's in there scanning things before I buy it on Amazon. Be like, come on, I can save 3 cents.
they're like, I wish you would have just bought this
Yeah.
on Amazon.
Yeah,
You're that guy.
that guy.
All right. Well, up next, we are going to be having a conversation with Doug Dell, talking about being called to missions and how that can look a little bit different for everyone. So stay tuned for that. All right. Today, we are joined by Doug Dell. Doug, tell us a little bit about yourself for people listening who might not know who you are. I mean, you're kind of famous around here to
I
a
know,
certain
that's
extent, at least
for
at Christ
sure.
Community Church. But for those who might not be familiar, tell us a little bit about your family and like how you got involved in what you've been doing at the church here.
Oh, sounds good. Yeah, I've been this summer. We married for 47 years.
Wow.
Cindy was 18 and I was 19 when we got married. And I was 25 and she was 23, 24. We had our first child, Tony, who is now in his early 40s, which is just hard to believe that I have a child that's 40 years old. And our daughter will be turning 40 this summer. We have 4 grandchildren. And we moved here from Brookings, South Dakota. I was with Hy-Vee for 36 years, and kind of an interesting story there. When I was 16, I worked at Yankee Kitchen washing dishes for 60 cents an hour.
Wow.
And this is in the 70s. And then I took a big pay raise and went to the YMCA and washed people's dirty clothes for $1 an hour. And really was excited about
You were
that
really
raise.
climbing that
Man, I was
ladder.
making a big move. And then I kind of got tired of it. My dad was with Procter & Gamble for 40 years. He was in the paper division. And he said, I was just out at Hy-Vee and they're hiring. He said, and I heard they're paying $2.45 an hour. So I've gone from 60 cents
Yeah.
to $1, now $2.45. But I also, before I went out to Hy-Vee, I interviewed at Kenny Shoes. I don't know if any of you remember Kenny Shoes, but it was a little shoe store in Waterloo, Iowa, and they were going to pay me $1.60 an hour. So I went home, and Dad says, "Okay, what are you going to be doing?" And I said, "Well, I've made my decision. I'm going to go to work for Kenny Shoes." And he goes, "No, wait a minute. $2.45 versus $1.60. I said, "Yeah, but Kenny's Shoes isn't going to make me cut my hair." Remember, it's the 70s now, the long hair.
Okay.
Well, I got an economic lesson all the way to the barbershop with my dad. I'm a junior in high school. And all of a sudden, I got this short, Hy-Vee haircut. I was just furious with my dad.
Oh, I bet.
The issue came 3 days later. I went home, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to tell my parents this because I'd made such a fuss about my hair. And I told them this is what I wanted to do the rest of my career. And I absolutely loved it. I mean, I was 17 years old, loved what I was doing, loved the company, and I was with them for 36 years. And then retired, and I was originally from Lincoln, Nebraska. My grandparents came over from Russia in 1920s.
Wow.
My grandfather was a white Russian, and there was the red Russians, the communists and the non-communists. So my grandfather fell under the non-communists, and they were going to draft him into the army, and he didn't want anything to do that. So him and my grandmother, and she was pregnant at the time, they got on a ship, snuck out of Russia, and they lost a baby on the way over on the ship and came through Baltimore. And then my grandmother had a brother in Lincoln, Nebraska, so he sponsored them when they got to Baltimore. They got on a train and ended up in Lincoln, Nebraska, and they raised 13 children, and my dad was the 13th child. So, so I was with Ivy for 36 years and retired in 2009. I was 53 years old, and we started to think that, we'd like to get a little bit closer to Lincoln. Always wanted to get back to Lincoln, but our daughter moved here and got married here and had a little baby at the time here. So the more we visited, Omaha looked pretty good. So we ended up coming down here in July of 2012 until this day. So.
Wow. So I have a selfish question I got to ask. Is there actually a helpful smile in every aisle?
Yes, there better be. Yes.
And so then how did you get to Christ Community?
That's kind of an interesting story. The church that I was in Brookings, South Dakota, just a really nice, smaller church. About 400 people in it, and we were just really wanting to get closer to home. And I just always thought that's the size church that we wanted to attend. So we got here and we started attending different churches. I think we went to 5 different churches. And we met Kathy and Mark Carlson, who attend here. And they have a mutual friend that's in Christ Community, not Christ Community, but Campus Crusade for Christ. So the couple from Campus Crusade said, you need to meet the Dells. So we met each other and they invited us to come to church. And it was really interesting. I just kept thinking, man, I kept driving by this church, we're here on the highway. I'm like, it's awful big for me, awful big for me. But we came and it was instant. It was absolutely instant, exactly where we were at, what we were looking for. And I had never heard of Missionary Alliance. I had an E-Free background, Baptist background. So I called the pastor back in Brookings and says, hey, tell me about this Missionary Alliance. And he goes, Doug, it's exactly where you and Cindy are at in your lives right now. He says, I would encourage you to go. So we've been here ever since.
Wow.
That's cool. So as someone that retired pretty early, I mean, 53 is what is that, typical 65, you know? So you beat them by a decade. How, as you were kind of winding into that process and figuring out what that would look like, what were some of the thoughts that were going through your mind? You can probably move anywhere at this point. Like how was your faith maybe during those Hy-Vee years? Obviously you said you were attending church, but as you were thinking about, okay, I've earned money, I'm ready to move into retirement, that phase of life, what were some of the things that I guess you were wrestling with, dreaming about, that got killed, that were resurrected?
Well, it was interesting. I became a Christian in my early 20s, and we were both kids. Like I said, 18 and 19 when we got married, both Cindy and I, and we were just kids, And what Cindy didn't realize when she got into this marriage was that my best friend was a 12-ounce long neck bottle of beer. And it took me a long time to shake that and to just let the Lord work in my life. And we waited until I was 25, and she was, I think, 23 or 24 when we had our first child, Tony. And we had attended a church, and it seems like God is continually putting men in my life to guide me, to mold me, to keep me moving in the right direction. And I was still struggling. I would go back and forth. And we were attending a church plant in Kirksville, Missouri, and the pastor there were meeting in a school. So he would ask after I got off work every Saturday. It was missional for him. I had no idea. I was just setting up chairs, but in his mind, he was working with me. And he would just have me set up chairs for the next day's service. And he was watching and talking to me, and he finally one day just pulled me to the side, and he said, Doug, he goes, I've been watching you. And he goes, it's like in Revelation where Jesus has the warm water in his mouth and he spits it out because you're not warm, you're not cold. And he goes, you're warm. And he goes, you need to get off the fence and live your life for Christ, or get out of our way. And it was really powerful to me, and it really made me look in the mirror, changed my life. And he basically said, hey, tell me about your quiet time. I said, you mean when I take a nap? And he goes, no, you don't have any idea what I'm talking about. I said, no. So he said, I'm going to have one of my elders come over tomorrow morning, or actually Monday morning, and spend a little bit of time just showing you how we do a quiet time, how he does his. Each person's is a little different. So from that, it started to grow, and really was excited about moving forward. And then just was focused on my family, church, and Hy-Vee, of course. And when you're with Hy-Vee as a store director, you're working 50, 60 hours a week, occasionally 70 hours a week. So they're long weeks, and so you're so focused on that. And at my store, I was all commission. So if the store made money, I received a paycheck. If the store lost money, I owed that percentage. So you're pretty sharp.
Oh, wow.
It really is employee owned.
Yes, you have got to stay sharp on that, or you're not going to get paid. And type of thing. I've got 2 little ones at home and a wife, and so I just kept continuing to grow. And there was a couple things when we moved to Brookings, South Dakota. Again, there was another man that came into my life. His name was Pastor Dennis Erickson. And Dennis, again, wasn't going to leave me where I was at. It just seems like God keeps putting these men in my life. And we were going to this, he says, hey, we're going to this thing called Promise Keepers. And he goes, I want you to come with me. Would you come? So we went, this was the second Promise Keeper event, and we went out to Boulder, Colorado. And it was, I think, a 2-day event or a day and a half event, but it was amazing for me in my walk, my spiritual growth. And one of the speakers was John Maxwell, and he talked about Christian leadership. And with that Christian leadership, he talked about being humble, being a servant to your wife, being a servant to your children, being a servant to your employees. So in this process, it really hit me that I was more authoritative. I just, more kind of, hey, this is the way we're going to do it. We're moving on, whether I was at home or at work. And all of a sudden, I realized what God was calling me to be was a servant to my wife, my family, and my employees. I had 372 employees at the store. And that was kind of step one. So I was starting to understand what God was calling to be as a man, as a leader, what a true man looks like as a man that loves and serves his family and his employees. Well, then Pastor Dennis goes, well, I got the next step for us. We're going to Willow Creek to this leadership summit. So we headed out there. And I remember very clearly the speaker talking about the local church being the hope of the world. And it really hit me that, you know what, that is absolutely right. And if, as I read through Scripture, and I believe that's what God is calling the church, is to be the hope of the world. So that's when that process started working. My children were probably middle school, high schoolish age at that time. And I really started to say, okay, God, what does this look like? Because I knew I was getting closer to retirement. I knew that, what are you calling? What does this look like? And from there, basically just kept, asking and seeking. And it was so funny because when I did retire, Pastor Dennis had just retired himself in Brookings after 34 years of service to the church. He moved to Minneapolis. So the new pastor came in, great guy, Scott Maurer, younger guy, had a lot of changes. Like when you go to a new store as your store director, there are things you want changed, or things you see that you want changed to kind of meet your personality or the direction you think the store needs to go to make it the best it possibly can. Well, Scott comes in and he goes, okay, you're getting really close to retirement. Yeah, I am. And I said, I'm so excited. He says, well, what are your thoughts? So, well, I'll probably run with men's ministry. We go on these tours every once in a while, we get together and we have coffee and, we'll do a Bible study. And he's kind of like, man, I think there's more to that, Doug. You're thinking inward. You're thinking, I need you to be thinking outward. And it's like, wow. And at that time, the youth pastor, and I'd been in Brookings for 22 years, the youth pastor asked me if I would go to Belize because I retired actually it was 13 years ago Monday. I retired. And he said, we're going in end of June, we're going to Belize on a mission trip. And I said, oh, that sounds great. What do you need? He goes, what do you mean? I said, how much? I can write a check. Let me help. He goes, yeah, you are, but you're going too. I said, no. No, I'm a white shirt, tie guy, slacks. They're going to the jungles of Belize. Like this is not my idea of what I should be doing in my retirement. And so he just kept after me, and I finally said yes. So my plans at retirement were completely different than what God had planned for me in my retirement. And I truly, in my deepest heart, believe that God used those 36 years with Hy-Vee to prepare me for the things, the opportunities, the things I get to be a part of right now. And so we went over to Belize. Day one, I'm like, get me out of here. The kids didn't see it because it was a youth group that was there. I had worked with these kids for 22 years. I taught Sunday school in middle school and high school for 22 years, so I knew all these kids. I knew them really, really, really well. And that's why Pastor Dennis the youth pastor wanted me to go with him. And this is an 11-day mission trip. So day one goes by and I go, I got 10 more days of this. Get me out of here. We're in the jungle. We're digging footings for a hurricane shelter for the local church. We had to go down 24 inches. The first 18 inches, the most beautiful black dirt you've ever seen. But the next is all ironstone. And we're just pounding away at this stuff, and we're just doing this day after day. So day two goes by and it's just like, this isn't going well. This is not going well. Kids didn't see it, but inside, I'm just like, get me out of here.
Yeah.
Day three, somewhere in that day, I will never forget this in my whole life. I had this sense inside me that something was telling me, Doug, you're making this about you, Doug Dell, and it shouldn't be about you. It should be about the Lord. Mm-hmm. And it just really turned, because I'm a selfish person. I can be self-centered, and I was making this all about me, and I realized God didn't call me there, to be about me. He called me there to be about Him. So for those rest of those, days, it was fabulous. I had the time of my life. I just let go and say, Lord, here I am. And still struggled at times, but made it through. And it's a group called Praying Pelican Missions. It's a non-denominational mission, and they're out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and they go all over the Caribbean. They're now actually going in Africa. And their last day of their mission trips is always kind of a fun day. It's whether they take you to a beach or they'll take you someplace so you can have kind of some downtime and really process, what did God tell you? Well, that night, the director with Praying Pelican in Belize said, hey, can I buy you an ice cream? I said, sure.
Who's going to turn down an ice cream?
Especially in 95-degree heat and 100% humidity. So we went out that night, had ice cream, and he looked at me and he goes, you're retired, right? Okay. He goes, now what do you do in your retirement in your summers? And I'm going, you're kidding me, Lord. You are absolutely kidding me. So he asked me to come aboard, and so I hadn't talked to my wife for 11 days, and that's the first time in my life I hadn't talked to her in 11 days, because when we were there, just weren't able to communicate. So I got into Atlanta and got off the plane, and the first thing I did is I called her, and she knew. She said, tell me what you're doing, which was really interesting that, God had told her in her heart something was going on. So I told her what they're asking me to do. And so we got home, we talked about it, spent some time about it. And she goes, she's good with it. So I've done about 30 trips with Praying Pelican. I would do 6 to 7 a summer. And was just amazing. And then when we moved here to Omaha, I was still working with them. It's a volunteering with them, leading teams. And then I met the Protos in the DR. So met them, and then they were kind of like, well, what are you doing in your summers when you're not? So
sounds like a common question.
Yes, exactly. So basically from there, I talked to Praying Pelican. They totally understood. And I had been preparing them, for this. And so then now in my summers at times, as the Protos need help, I'll pop down there and, help them lead some teams and do some food distributions and stuff like that.
Very cool. I think it's really neat just hearing your story, how your corporate life kind of collided with the Global Leadership Summit, and how you were just in a position to turn that on and onto missions for your employees and for things like that. And then just how your obedience and your response to God's calling just kind of kept being like, he kept leading you through those things. So as you kind of like look through your experience up to now, like how have you just seen just the impact of you responding to that and you responding to God's calling?
It has really, really changed my view of the church in some aspects. Mark always preaches on Acts 1:8. Our pastor when we're down in Florida, he was preaching one time on 1:8 and then 2:23 or 2:24. And I was always that 2:24, more of the, the fellowship and that type of stuff, not really realizing that God was calling calling us out. And then as you read the end of Matthew, he's talking about going out, making disciples of the world. So it really changed how I saw the church. It really helped me understand there are churches that are inward thought bound, and there are churches that are outward bound thought. And that's what I love so much about Christ Community is we came in September of 2012. So we got here in July. So it took us all the way to September to walk through these doors. And they were doing this Step into Village 1, And it was kind of like, wow, that's exactly where Scott, my pastor back home, said, it's exactly where you're at, Doug.
Yeah, that's cool.
So we signed up, and 2 weeks later, we're down on Ames Street, somewhere off of Ames Street, painting a house for Abide.
So I think one of the first times I ever got to work with you was I used to be the middle school pastor here, and so one of our hopes was to take students in the summer to work with our friends at Abide, and we would fix up lighthouses and things like that. And I remember just opportunities for you to speak into young people's lives and think of like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm retired and obviously work with other ministries at the church called the Geezers, which we can talk about later. But if you've got an opportunity to speak to a group of middle schoolers, which I know you've done before, young people that are like, okay, I'm looking at the trajectory of my life and what I want to do. And I need to have a job. Like money's important. Just like, you're trying to go from 60 cents to $1 or whatever. That's important. To
$2.45. Don't forget that.
So
I was in the cash.
That was a huge
My
jump.
girlfriend was like, wow,
big time.
2 movies a week this week.
This is awesome. So how would you encourage a young person as they're just beginning to think of entering a career world, college, whatever, to be thinking both, hey, I need these skills in the corporate world and I can contribute that way, but how do I also tie that to being missional in that type of world?
I will never forget as a brand new store director, I was pretty confident in myself, but I got to a store that was losing money big time. And I remember having these great ideas, and corporate had a different idea on a direction I was supposed to go on this one time. And the senior vice president came in and he pulled me outside and he says, now what's that say in the building? I said, well, it says Hy-Vee Food Store. He says, it doesn't say Doug Dell's, does it? It says Hy-Vee. I'm like, okay, I get it. But what I took from that, and I remember this to this day, I kept thinking, I see what you're saying, or always a senior vice president. But actually, it's Christ. It's His. And when I started to realize that I had to work, I had a family. It's a balancing act of working and serving, but it really isn't. It's missional. I had 372 employees at the store, and hopefully my light shined so that they could see Christ. The door was always open for those opportunities. So I'd always say that it's not a two-way street. It's if I'm a young person, or I'm telling a young person, I'd say make whatever you're going to do to the glory of God, and honor Him through your actions, honor Him through the way you live your life, honor Him the way you treat the employees that you work with, whether you're a first-time employer or the senior vice president of the company. I would encourage you to look at it that way, and when you see it that way, that's your mission field. That's your Acts 1:8. My Acts 1:8 was Hy-Vee for 36 years.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
What are some questions that people in that position of retirement or moving on to that next chapter in their life, what are some questions they should be asking themselves to prepare for that and do it well?
Yeah, I tell you that Pastor Dennis was such a help, because he knew I was getting closer before he retired. But we just talked a lot about, what does it look like? What do you think God's calling you to do? There is a balance. You've worked hard. You've worked all of those years. You've worked 50, 60 hours a week, some people 40 hours a week, so whatever it might be. And you've built, some retirement funds, and you want to be able to have some more time to yourself where you spend time with family and friends. But on the flip side, there's that service, there's that calling that we're called to as Christians. Yeah. And I think there's times I get good balance, and I think there's times I get my balance is too much, whether it's too much downtime or too much service work, it might be. But I've been always fortunate. Cindy made it very clear when we got married that her heart was to be a stay-home mom. So she's always been that barometer for me that was always there to help me understand when, hey, Doug, you got a few more hours, at home this week than you had last week. Or she would say, hey, this week's great. We're in good shape. If you've got things you need to get done, do it. So I also would tell a young person, or a person is thinking of retiring, find that person that's going to help you be that barometer to really help you keep an eye on, how you're going. And that's where I've been fortunate with Cindy after, it'll be 47 years this summer, and she's just fabulous. To this day, she manages my schedule. Like last year, we went with this whole pound. So there was weeks I was going 6 days a week. And she'd pull me aside, said, hey, we're getting back too much, we need you to pull you back. So we need to get up and see the kids, or we need to do this or do that. So I would encourage you to find a barometer, someone in your life you trust. Pastor Dennis was that to me for 18 years before he retired in Brookings.
So you mentioned the Hope House. For people listening who might not know what that is, could you how would you explain that to someone?
That's a great question. The church helped plant Mission Church in North Omaha. And Myron has a dream of having homes in North Omaha that can be renovated and turned over to ministry. And so there's a group of us called the Geezers, believe it or not. I just hate that name, but they seem to embrace it. And we get together, like last year, we'd get together 2-3 times a week. This year, we're working on an abide house because we couldn't find a home to buy right now in North Omaha. Homes are hard to find right now. But the Hope House, we basically would work, most of the guys would work a couple days a week down there, and we renovate the house. Christ Community through donations, and Christ Community through the giving of individuals in our church. Use that money towards, we had about a $60,000 budget, and we tore the house apart and put it back together, and started out with 3 guys coming out of incarceration. And it's now kind of dwarfed into, there were some needs that these gentlemen had that Myron's team wasn't able to address, to help them with. So the house now has, I believe, 12 Afghans living in it. And Myron's so excited because I got across the street. He says, I have some individuals from Afghanistan, we can minister to, we can get to know. And so there's several families in there right now. And so, yeah, that's kind of what we do. And now we're working on an abide house, which they call lighthouses, over on Larimore Street. And we're there on Tuesdays and Thursdays and working on that house for abide. And they'll make it a lighthouse. They will move someone in from the area, from their church or a staff member, and their responsibility then is that block or 2, and they'll just meet the needs of that block for Christ. So that's taking a block back at a time.
Yeah,
that's cool.
I like the relationship that you have with Cindy, and I just think even the idea, if we could take anything away from you, just finding someone that's a barometer. I really have found in my life that when Ben and I are on the same page, that is a way that God has really shown us decisions that we need to make when we're on the same page.
Yep.
And it sounds like that from when you were in missions. But how has your mission together happened, and how have you supported her calling, since it's something that you so clearly see should be a part of our life? How do you help foster that in her?
What's interesting about Cindy is she's more of a support role type of person. So if she's in a ministry, when she's in a ministry, it's more of a support role. The behind the scenes, don't want to be out in front, but wants to be behind. Oh my gosh, things don't happen.
Right.
Things don't happen. I always said at Hy-Vee, the 2 most important people in my store was my janitor and my bookkeeper. And when those 2 people were gone, I knew they were gone. And that's Cindy behind the scenes. She's just that person behind the scenes that keeps things moving in the right direction, helping wherever she needs to help, and that's what her gift is. And she's really good at hospitality too. So,
yeah, and that's the fortunate thing about being, spouses in ministry. Like everything you're doing, she's supporting and a part of the kingdom wins that are going into eternity. When you're swinging a hammer and helping build an abide house, just that availability of letting you have that time, because she could say, no, this is all mine. We could be in Florida right now, right? We could be doing so many other things. You worked hard, you spent but the ability to self-sacrifice even time with you in that retirement, because I'm sure she had dreams for retirement that look a little different than what God called you to, but that's so cool. I know one of our
Can I tell you one quick funny story about Cindy? Well, anyway, just actually two funny stories. Being gone 50, 60 hours a week. And with Hy-Vee, when you're on commission like I am, when you're done, you're done. It's not like, you go back part-time or whatever. You're done. You're really done. So I'm the morning person. She's the evening person. So the first day of retirement, I get up and I am bouncing off the walls. We've got a whole list of things we're going to be doing. And she just didn't say a word. Day 2, here we go again. She looks at me and she just puts the paper down, puts her cup of coffee to the side and says, would you shut up?
I think Cindy and I could be friends.
I said, whoa, what's going on?
For sure.
She goes, man, Doug, she goes, I've had 36 years of kind of, get the kids off to school and have a little bit of time to myself, and you come home and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And where are these lists? I am not a Hy-Vee employee. Well, the second story, then about 3 weeks later, got up, so even to this day, after I've spent 13 years of retirement now, I kind of, hi, hon, good morning, how you doing, I love you, and then wait to be spoken to. Kind of go off, do my quiet time or whatever I'm going to do, until she's kind of gets going. So we're now week 3 into my retirement, and she's just, I could tell, she didn't have to say a word, but I knew something was wrong. So I said, okay, all right, honey, I haven't said anything, just said good morning, how you doing, what's going on, what can I do now? She gave me a vacuum cleaner at my retirement party in front of all of my employees, because she said, you're not just going to come home and sit around like you are before you retired, I'm going to wait on you hand and foot. She goes, I bought you that and you have not used it once. And I said, honey, there's a lack of communication. I said, all you need to do is just tell me what you want and it'll get done. So from that point on, when I got up in the morning and the vacuum's in the middle of the living room, it's vacuum day. So I know now.
That's good.
I love that.
That's good.
But the first day that I did it, so she puts the vacuum out. So at 6 a.m., I'm up going. I got things to do. Oh, she comes, because she's not an early riser. She comes flying out of the bedroom. What are you doing? It's like, now I get it. All right, wait till you're up. You had your cup of coffee. Then I could vacuum.
I mean, I see that. I think a lot of people probably don't realize, and that's not what this entire podcast is about, but when you get to retirement and you've done life a certain way for 4 decades, and then all of a sudden you're both home, but in a totally different capacity than you're typically used to, you're like, how do we, what's going on here? Wait, you have your stuff, I have my stuff, and even that breakdown in communication because you've communicated a certain way. And so I think that shocks a lot of people.
It took a while.
As they walk into it.
And it took a while for me to realize she wasn't my employee.
Yeah.
About a week. That was it.
That's all it takes.
That's all it took with Cindy.
So as we talk about at Christ Community Church, you've mentioned this a little bit, that Acts 1:8, we're about obviously caring for the flock that God's given us here and sharpening one another. That's part of what this podcast is, and preaching and things like that. But then we also have this DNA statement to reach one more. Mm-hmm. So what's that mean to you? How does that, just even a DNA statement like that mean to you when you're balancing global missions or an abide house, or do those things impact you, like these pithy phrases, or are you just like, no, I'm just doing God's work?
I think for me, it goes back to years ago, again, Pastor Dennis, and he took us to experiencing God. And I told Dennis, I said, I'm always struggling on what is God's will in my life? What's he calling me to do besides Hy-Vee or at Hy-Vee? And one of the things that Henry Backleby talked about was, just seeing what's going around you and getting involved. So I've kind of taken that attitude, whether I'm, overseas or whether I'm in Miami or whether I'm in North Omaha, is just be aware of what's going on around me. And by doing that, you have the opportunity to minister to so many people, whether it's down with the geezers, and one of the guys is having a tough day, or one of their grandchildren's having a tough day, and you hear that. you pull the guys together and you just pray, or you're accountable to each other. Or whether, let's say you're with Myron, and you're with someone from his congregation, and you just have that opportunity to listen or share or whatever it might be. Or you're in Miami so many times down there, you just have the opportunity to the people in need just to sit down and talk. So many times people just want to, just talk. Or overseas, same way. So to me, that reaching one more is kind of what Blackaby's talked about. Henry Blackaby is just being aware of what's going on around you and doing his will. And I loved how, and this is one thing was it Kara that talked, was it last Sunday or 2 Sundays ago?
Yeah.
And it really opened my eyes to that, that next level for me would be to share biblical stories. It's not uncommon for me to open a Bible and share a Bible verse, but also to maybe share stories, like he did with Sarah and Abraham or whatever it might be. As we're hearing those, as talking to those individuals, just sharing stories from the Bible, because I think sometimes when you share a scripture, sometimes a wall will come up. Yeah. But if you're sharing a story, and especially if it's relating to them, it's like, wow, I think that takes that wall down, and that gives you then that opportunity. So to me, it's just literally seeing what's going on around me and being aware of it and asking God, wherever you go, hey, what did you call me for?
So to kind of piggyback on that, you mentioned several times in your story where people have approached you with a need that they identified you as kind of part of the solution for that, and if people are struggling with seeing that calling in their life, or am I actually called to mission work or anything like that, what are some other ways that maybe they can identify that calling in their lives if they don't necessarily have someone just stepping up to them and asking for help, or other ways? What are other ways you would say, hey, this is how you could see God for those sorts
I
of
wouldn't
things?
be afraid to ask people around me or staff or whatever, hey, do you see strengths that I might have? Know your spiritual gifts type of thing.
Yeah, that's good.
Though I get worried about spiritual gifts. Some people say, well, that's not my spiritual gift. I'm not going to do that. Well, I think we're called to do a lot of things that we're not good at, because it's not us. It's Christ doing it through us. But I would find people that I trust to say, hey, what do you think? I would try a lot of things. We've had some geezers, guys, that have come on that have maybe lasted a couple of weeks and realized, that's not for me. That's not what I want to do. But go on to do other things that are very powerful. So, not be afraid to try new things too. Because there's so many opportunities out there to serve, whether it be down at Abide or go on a short-term mission trip. I mean, you really want. We took 5 of us geezers. We went. I hate that word, geezers, too. By the way, I think I've said that.
We will note that and pass that feedback.
5 of us went down to Miami in January. Okay, and one of the guys, and I just love these guys to the ends of the earth. One of the guys, 70s, so I've never ever experienced anything like this. And basically, all we did for 4 days was just work at the center. But it grabbed him so hard, and he looked, and he just kept, I realize how selfish a person I am. He says, this has changed my life. And I'm going, 4 days, just, but I get it. And that's an experience. Short-term mission trips is a great way to experience maybe your strengths, your weaknesses, give you that opportunity, because it changed my life. It absolutely turned the trajectory of where I was headed, what I thought ministry of God was calling me to. So that's another opportunity.
Has it felt like it's come easily for you, or has it always been a struggle initially when those callings have come onto your life, or do you feel it's kind of a mixed bag? Or
my wife says I'm a guy that walks into a door 3 times, cracks his head 3 times before he realizes, wow, there's a door handle. Yeah. So I am slower at catching on to things. Yeah. But when I do, it really just think it's like get out of my way. My senior, actually the president of Hy-Vee, told me one time, he goes, man, sometimes you're the hardest guy to sell, but once I get you sold, then I get out of your way and I don't worry about you. And my wife would say that too.
Yeah, that's good.
That's good. And I think one of the things we love about your story is, like, right now we've been in mission week at the church. And a lot of times I think we assume that being a missionary, it equals like I got to pack up the whole family and we're moving, we're learning another language and all that kind of stuff, which is, we need that for sure. But Absolutely. I think a lot of times we just are like, well, I'm not a missionary, because we have this picture of what a missionary is, but you've modeled it so well, and just the mindset of in a corporate job. And then, what's the next place that God's called me to, whether it's praying pelicans or your favorite named geezer ministry or whatever it is. And so you're constantly, I think, modeling what's most able for most people. You know, most people, God isn't calling the masses, I don't think, across the sea, but he's calling us across the street, or to have that conversation, to look at where God is moving with the employees you're working with and joining him in conversations and just seeing people, and not even just as like pawns that I need to go win and reach, but as people that are made in God's image that he loves, and they're worth sitting down and listening to their stories. And, oh, grandkids got something going on. Let's forget about the hammers for a second.
Yep.
Let's care about you as a person. And I think that is something all of us could attain a little bit more in our daily lives, and it's reachable for the people who are like, I'm so disconnected to that far off vision of being a missionary in Thailand. I know I'm not called to it, but all of us are called to steward our lives the way you've been describing, which I think has so much implication.
And everything's a mission field.
Yeah.
Everything we do. Your family, when you go shopping, when you go, can you help that person in the grocery store? Can you help that person at Lowe's or Home Depot, whatever it might be? It's a mission field.
And I think our calling always stays the same. Like, God is always clearly speaking to us. And so we may, like my story, the way that the Lord calls me to missions or to reach people is going to look different than yours because he's made us different. But I think our callings can be similar, but our scenery looks different. Yep. So it's like we can be in many different places. And so as you're kind of moving into the next phase of life, like, what does missions look like for you in the next couple of years? Does it stay the same? Does it
It's
look
an
different? Does the
interesting
scenery
question.
change?
That's actually a really good question that I'm going through right now, kind of working through right now. And the fact being 66 years old, when I first retired at 53, it'd go 7 weeks and you'd get up at 6 in the morning, you go to bed at 11 o'clock at night. You'd do that, Saturday through Saturday, and you'd wash your clothes in between planes coming in with teams. Well, I can't do that anymore. I just don't have that gas in me anymore, that fuel that I need. So, example with the Protos is they've been so gracious in my being able to serve with them, and the fact that, my strength for them, what they need is people to come down and lead teams, so they don't have to worry about, okay, they're over at this church doing this, or they're over at, they're doing the homeless ministry, or they're over here doing, whatever it might be, that I can take that team and I can lead them. But they know then about 6, 7 o'clock at night, it's time to just kind of let Doug just kind of go back to his room or back up to the office there at the center or whatever. So it's evolving to where I'm finding myself, it's somewhat the same goal, but just don't have the fuel that I had before. So they've been very gracious in allowing me to, to take that time and, get up, help the team with breakfast with them all day, get them supper, and then kind of just fade off into the sunlight, and then they kind of pick it up from there. So Craig and Eva, Eric Carpenter, as I've progressed here, and as you get older, you're not the same body you used to have. They've been so gracious in working around my yeses or yeses and my no's or no's. And that's one thing I think is important too, to build in a ministry, is build that relationship with your team where they can trust you and you can trust them. So to the point where I can say, hey, I'm in, I can do it, yes, or hey, I can't, or I can do it, but here's some limitations that I have.
I think we're happy that when we sent the random email to you about being on a podcast,
that was a yes.
That was a yes.
Hey, honey, what's a podcast? Oh, Doug, you have no idea.
It's like a radio show.
Yeah, that's what she said.
You're on the radio.
So you guys will laugh at this. So I said, honey, what do I wear for this? She goes, Doug, I looked at it. You don't have to worry about what you're wearing today. It's okay.
Yeah. Look how casual they are.
Exactly.
So one thing, I don't know, I feel like we maybe danced around it and haven't said it specifically, but you were working at Christ Community Church as a volunteer, pretty much. Like, you are on our staff page as a volunteer, and now you're moving away from that.
Yes,
and you're going to stay in Florida full time.
Yeah. Our children here are moving to Atlanta, so we have a set in Atlanta now. We have a set in Minneapolis, or in Mankato, Minnesota, close to Minneapolis, where we'd fly into. So Cindy and I have just been the whole winter trying to decide, what's this look like. We're kind of tired of being part-time, if that makes sense. We're part-time here. We're part-time there. It seems like when I come back here, it's usually right after Easter, and I've missed so much of what's so cool about, Christianity is Easter, and I miss that. Though I had it, of course, in Florida, the church we attend down there. And then we come back here and get all, going again. And then we get back to Florida and it's kind of like, oh, we missed out on all those things down there. So we kind of decided that we did not want to be part-time anymore. So, but this also gives me the opportunity to, be more active with the protos. And timing is really good right now because they don't have the staff that they had in the past. It's basically down to them and their families. So, yeah, it was a hard, long winter kind of discerning.
Yeah. So through all of this and all of your story, I think it's inspiring. I think on a lot of different levels for people to hear.
Thank you. That's
nice, I think it's true. I think because I think people, wherever they're at in life, they don't always see where maybe the ministry that they want fits into their life. But what would you say to people if they still are kind of, what on the fence about missions or even that term, or why should I care about that, or what does that even mean for me? Is there any encouraging words you could leave people with today?
I would just try it. For us, I should say not for me, for us, inner city scared us to death. When we first moved to town, we were going to go down to Ames Street, and do some work down there, and we were a little bit nervous about that. But I think one of the things that Craig and Eva and the team have done, and they've got some really easy on-ramps to where Second Saturday Serve. You can go down there for a couple hours. Give it a try. There's Abide. There's Mission Church. We give out backpacks. We do block parties. We do barbecues. We go and pick up garbage. We do a variety of things. And I would just say, get out there and try some of those things individually or as a family. The thing that lights me up the most is when I see whole families together coming down to paint or to do whatever we're doing down there. But Eva has just done a fabulous job lining up just so many easy on-ramp opportunities for people to get their feet wet and say, hey, I like this, or it wasn't for me. I'll try something else. But, Franklin School, it's just the most beautiful 330 kids you've ever seen in your life. But, they just love it when people come down and spend time with them.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and like
does that make sense?
Yeah, and like you said, I think you were that moment of going from like I'm the guy in the white shirt and the collar, and I can send a check, which is awesome. Yeah, send checks, please, because it does really make a difference in the lives of people. But like you described in the guy that went down to Miami with you, there's just something about proximity to these people, to the people that you're doing mission work with. Okay, go on a short-term mission trip just to see how that funding's being used. Doesn't mean you have to continue to go and commit to it the rest of your life, but there's just a new way that touching and smelling and feeling that our senses are engaged in mission, that all of a sudden, I think, one, it'll make you feel better about that check that you're sending, because all of a sudden you're seeing the actual influence. Like if you would have never gone to Belize and you're like, I just sent a check, but that digging is hard work. And then the payoff of that is, it's obvious, it's cliche. You get more out of it.
Oh, no doubt.
Than you give.
There's not a team I've ever worked with that wasn't the theme at the end of the week, is I received so much more than I gave. And I love Ron Doetzler's when he talks about out of the seats and into the streets. Yeah. That's what God's calling us to do. And when we first attended, I'm not sure if it's still out there, but as we left the first Sunday, on the backside of the Christ Community, it said, you are now entering the mission field.
Yeah.
And I'm going, you know what? It's absolutely right.
Yeah. It's true. Well, Doug, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Thanks for sharing your story.
Didn't hurt at all. I was really just wondering what a world.
It's your first podcast.
Oh, man.
You flying
You're
colors.
A pro.
Maybe you should start a podcast in Florida.
I'm just going to stay with what I do. Stay in my lane.
All right.
Ask Cindy.
You can
Cindy.
Maybe she'll
see
help.
what she thinks.
All right. Appreciate your time. Thanks everyone for listening. If you have any questions or concerns, you'd like to reach out to us, you can do that on social media at CCC Omaha, or you can send us an email to this podcast. That email address is podcast@cccomaha.org. But until next time, we'll talk to you then.